Hello learners, welcome to this module on Indian English literature. Today I am going to talk about the non-fictional prose, and primarily I will be focusing on the forms and varieties of prose. I am Anamika Shukla from the School of Humanities, Indira Gandhi National Open University. So to begin with, I would like to talk about, we're trying to compare prose and verse. So as the famous French poet Paul Valéry compares prose to walking and verse to dancing. Verse is the more stylized form, whereas we say prose is functional and is used for non-literary purposes. So verse would be more stylized and prose is more functional, and it is used for conveying messages. It is used for conveying ideas and information rather than developing in a very, or evolving, I would say, in a very stylized manner. Now, this does not mean that prose is lower, or it can employ, probably you cannot just put it at a lower pedestal. Rather, I would say that prose is something that can employ all the rhetoric techniques like simile, metaphor, personification, hyperbole, understatement, irony, etc., etc. So, it does employ all these techniques in a similar fashion as the verse uses. Now, prose, it can also be rhythmic, though rhythm in prose is different from the music of poetry. When we talk about the literary genre, it can use either prose or verse. Traditionally, the epic has always been in verse, but the qualities of an epic can be found in, I can give you a few examples, like it can be found in War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy, which is written in prose. And as we say that the novel is usually written in prose. But another example or an exception is, Eugene Onegin by Russian poet Pushkin. It is a novel written in verse. So, inspired by Pushkin, Vikram Seth has also written a novel in the form of sonnets, The Golden Gate. So, to move ahead, this is what we've tried to understood. We've tried to understood that prose, as is generally referred to as, something like walking or something like, moving in a straight manner, or rather, you're not using stylized functions or literary techniques or rhetorics. What I'm trying to make it clear is there are exceptions to this general perception. What has happened is, like the Greek drama and the Elizabethan drama, which followed this tradition, it is also written in verse. The famous tragedies by Shakespeare, they are great poetic dramas, but he has many prose passages also in his comedies, which are interspersed with songs. Modern English drama is in prose. T.S. Eliot is one such playwright who successfully attempts poetic drama. So poetry confers a certain heightening. Prose is derived, it kind of reaches a certain higher pedestal also. Now, when we talk about prose, it is derived from the Latin word which means direct or straightforward. So, a general perception is, when we talk about non-fiction or when we talk about prose, we are trying to convey a very direct and straightforward idea. Now, there are different literary forms of prose, and what are they? We're trying to understand. So, we have the short story, we also have the novel, we also have the fictional forms of verse, because they do not, confined to a particular idea, because there are a lot of writers who kind of experiment and they try and use this literary device. Now, we are trying to understand, or we shall be paying attention to the main non-functional forms, which are the essay, the biography and autobiography, and also the travelogue. So these are the main non-fictional forms, or I should say the literary forms of prose. Now, essay. So to talk about essay, it is something which is derived from the French word which means attempt. So when somebody is writing an essay, or when we are talking about an essay, which simply means that the writer is attempting to analyze a particular point of view, or a particular situation, or a particular content. So essay means you're trying to attempt at doing something. You're attempting to analyze a poetry, you're attempting to analyze an incident. So essay is primarily, I can say, it is something you can call it a prose composition, and to talk about the details, it has a moderate length, and it is generally devoted to a particular topic. So it confines, or if I put it in a more correct manner, rather it devotes itself to a particular topic, or a particular message, or a particular form of information. So there are various essays. We've been talking about essays of Bacon, where he talks about certain ideal situations of life, where he talks about of studies, of truth, of travel, and there are so many things which he has attempted to talk about through his essays. So essay is a composition in prose which is, which talks about a particular topic. Now, essays are of two types, formal essays and personal essays. So something which is conveyed in a very formal manner would rather refer to a formal essay, which are normally written by scholars in a particular field. And you can also say that the sole purpose of such essays is to convey ideas which are generally and we normally refer to these essays as articles. So, essay, a formal essay would be something which is written by the sole purpose of conveying a particular idea, and it conveys, now this idea is primarily of the writer. So, you can also interpret it as something which is in a very formal set pattern, attempting to talk about a particular idea. And we normally call them articles, and supposedly there are a lot of literary critical articles which deal in a lot of literary criticism. We also come across these kind of articles in journals. So to understand something which conveys a particular idea in a very straightforward, direct manner is a formal essay. Now, it also discusses the topic concerned with lot of objectivity, and the writer tries to remain impersonal. So again, important thing is a writer tries to convey something in a very direct manner, in a very impersonal manner, without getting involved in the content of writing, which means he is not putting his own emotions or his own feelings into the content. He is trying to deal with a particular topic or a particular idea. So this attempt constitutes in the forming of a formal essay, and the entire exercise is done to impart knowledge, because they are written in a very very simple, or I should say a light style, so as to to be easy to comprehend. So they try and make themselves understandable by the reader. And we can also say that they try to seek the attention of the reader. They also try to, to entertain the reader. And the style of such essays is often, it is based on some kind of colloquialism, or I can say the style is more or less conversational. They can also be anecdotal, and generally they reveal the personality of the author. So when we come to, or when I talk about English literature, the essays of Elia, which were written by Charles Lamb, they are famous specimen of personal essays. So now we've understood what a personal or a formal essay is all about and what is a personal essay. Now, so the difference between the two is, a formal essay is something which simply conveys, with objectivity and with impersonal endeavor, it conveys the content. When we talk about the personal essays, they are primarily, they kind of entertain the reader. They, apart from conveying the information, they also try and involve into a lot of subjectivity. There's a lot of subjectivity, and the style is often conversational. Now, when we talk about biography, which is again a form of formal writing, biography is the story of the life of an individual. So, unlike history, which concentrates on facts and figures, biography tries to project the personality of the person concerned, or I would say the writer. And it helps the reader to share, it helps the reader also and the writer also to primarily share their hopes and fears, their emotions and feelings. So, and when we try and understand what an autobiography is, the author is his own biographer in an autobiography. So, it tends to be more subjective. Events are seen through the consciousness of the protagonist. Of course, the passage of time may give a lot of objectivity to the recollection of ideas. Another, major difference between a biography and an autobiography is that an autobiography is primarily more selective in the choice of incidents that it is describing, and a biography can cover the whole life of the subject right from birth to death, and even discuss his reputation after his death. But when we talk about an autobiography, it is necessarily incomplete, but it also has the great advantage of presenting events at first. So, this is primarily what a biography and autobiography is. I would also like to talk about what a travelogue is. So, as we all understand, a travelogue is an account of the writer's travel, a detail of his journey, a detail of his understanding of the incidents and the places that he comes across. He also describes these incidents with a mix of his emotions. So, which means when we are reading a travelogue, it contains lot of, we are actually trying to understand the entire journey through the eye of the writer. So, the writer is somebody who is expressing his emotions and his feelings and his perception and also his understanding of his journey. Now, in an autobiographical account, the focus is mainly, this kind of an autobiographical account, which is a travelogue, because we generally understand that travelogue is also an autobiographical account to a certain extent. So, now in this kind of situation, the focus is primarily on places and people which a person meets during his journey. And we normally, there's less importance is given to the events in life of the individual, which means the author. So we are trying to understand through a travelogue the experience of the author as he moves from places and comes across varying kind of people. People belonging to different strata of life, to different background, to different socio-cultural background. So his understanding, when we are reading a travelogue, we are more interested to understand the details of the people and the places that a writer comes across. Rather, we are not interested in his personal life. We are not concerned with the events of the life of the author. Now, and we have this strong tradition of writing travelogues as far as English literature is concerned. Edison, who is supposedly known as the father of periodical essay, he wrote a travelogue. And also the early novelist Tobias Smollett, he also wrote a travelogue. Then we come across, Indian English literature too has many travelogues, right from Dean Muhammad's, the travel of Dean Muhammad through several parts of India, which came somewhere around in 1794. So, a lot of travelogues have been written in Indian English literature also. Now, we've been talking about the forms of non-fiction prose. We're trying to also understand the different varieties of prose which are employed by a writer, whether he's dealing with a fiction or a non-fiction. So, what are the different varieties of prose that a writer uses? What happens is, there primarily are three different varieties. We call them the descriptive variety. The second one that we need to understand, we're going to talk about, is the narrative variety, and the next is the expository prose. So, these are not very exclusive categories. A writer may also use some different type of categories or varieties while writing his prose, but primarily, these are the three different varieties. So, when we talk about the descriptive prose can be used to describe a person or a thing or a place, and a very good description is something which vividly recreates the event or the object, and it appears that we are, face to face with that event. It appears, it is, I can say, a very picturesque description. We kind of feel and experience, and I would say see or observe that event face to face. We come across that object face to face. So, the entire faculty of the author or the writer to describe, which means he is kind of very vividly recreating the event in front of the author. He has this capability of recreating the object before the readers. So, he does so in such a way that we ourselves feel that we ourselves have experienced that event. Now, what happens is, it also appears that we are seeing that event. The entire event has been seen and heard and experienced by us. Now, there are certain descriptions that can be impressionistic, which means they also present certain things from a particular and a very personal point of view. Now, what happens is, now an impressionistic description reveals not just the object, but also the sensibility of the person who is observing it. On the other hand, we can have descriptions especially of places which have a kind of photographic realism. So, when we read these passages, we feel that we are looking at photographs or videotapes of the place. Now this is happening only by reading that particular piece of a non-fiction, that particular piece of prose. So, descriptive prose deals in vividly recreating the objects, in vividly creating, a very picturesque description of the events. So, it appears that we are looking at photographs of those places or events. Now, the next is the narrative prose. Now, this narrative prose describes events with minute details. It deals with them probably in a manner as to, it evolves or it grows. It appears that we are dealing with what happens during a particular period of time, during a certain course of time. So, it is the action that the writer describes, and this action absorbs our attention. It retains our interest. We are caught in this action. So, narration, the narrative prose deals with narration. So, now this narration can also be slow, and it can also be very fast. It can also be exciting. It can also be, a very, very matter of fact, factual narration. It can also be something which heightens our emotion, which kind of stimulates our emotion, which kind of pushes us into an emotional heightening. So, it can be highly imaginative, and at the other time it can also be purely objective. So, what happens is, and normally a narrative deals with external happenings. They can be public events or they can be interpersonal relationships. Now, what is important here is to understand, we can, a narrative prose may be used to describe a particular public event. It can also be used to narrate interpersonal relationships. So, the writer can narrate internal events. He can also talk about, the varying feelings and emotions, the evolution of feelings and emotions, the changes in the feelings and emotions. Because what happens is, when you're trying to narrate a particular incident, it is something like, it travels through the passage of time. You kind of evolve through the journey. You evolve through narration. So, there's a whole lot of change in ideas. The ideas vary from where we began to where we end. The writer, in this process deals with the changing emotions. He deals with the change in feelings. So, this is narrative prose. Now, non-fiction prose, the fictional prose forms like biographies, like travelogues, autobiographies, they all deal with factual narratives. When we talk about novels and short stories, they deal with events which are primarily born out of the writer's imagination. So, I can say that, perhaps there can be no rigid rule or to confine them as factual narratives, as biographies, as narratives describing events. But what happens is, a good historical novels incorporates a lot of historical facts into the narrative, while the autobiographies, they can primarily be something which involve a lot of imagination, because they can be so imaginative that the facts are not very important here. Now, we also have a kind of fiction based on actual events. Such a novel is called faction or a non-fiction novel. Truman's novel In Old Blood deals with crime. It talks about punishment in Kansas, and it is based on interviews with the accused. Norman Mailer generally terms these kind of novels as true life novels, because in his work, The Executioner's Song, it chronicles the life and death of Gary Gilmore, who is a murderer and who demanded his own execution in Utah. So novels and short stories give more, they provide, they kind of give more opportunity or more scope to the writers to employ different narrative voices. But when we talk about the narrative prose, it has an important place in non-fiction also. Now, the next is the expository prose. The expository prose defines, or primarily we can say that it explains a subject which is very scholarly when we are dealing with such kind of subjects, or you can say scholarly written, probably topics on science, technology or philosophy, religion, political science, economics. They all fall under the category of expository prose. So it presents the details in a very concrete and realistic manner, and the entire prose is set in with a lot of logical sequence. So the purpose of the writer here is not to describe something, or he is not trying to narrate a story. Rather, he is presenting facts and ideas. Now, good writers, they attempt to use many devices to present their subjects effectively. They kind of illustrate their point of view by using examples. They also, use varying tones from, probably at times they try to use rhetoric. Other times they try to be conversational. They try to narrate interesting anecdotes. They also try to present analogies in support of their arguments. They also, inculcate lot of figures of speech. So there are various techniques, literary techniques that they use. Now, much of non-fiction prose is explicatory in nature, but this does not mean that expository prose has no place in fiction. So, there are many great novelists such as Tolstoy and others who present the view of the writer on life and society also. So, I would rather say, whether it is fictional or non-fictional, we also need to examine the diction of the writer, because the words that he uses or his choice of vocabulary, the syntax and the structure of the sentence, all these things are also, whether the entire narrative is short or long. Is he using simple sentences, or does he prefer using complex sentences, with lot of clauses and parenthetical comments? So, the structure of paragraph, the writer's use of punctuation, all this talk about his style, because, but the only thing is, we can never analyze the style of a writer as a separate identity. We cannot separate the style from meaning. So, the literary meaning of an entire piece depends a lot on the manner in which it is said. A simple paraphrase, will probably put the entire text under analysis. So, though the beginning of Indian English writing is not fully documented, we've tried to understand the non-fictional prose, the various forms of non-fictional prose, and the merits and demerits, and how a writer employs various techniques to make his writing more effective and influential. So thank you for now.